Hello and welcome to the TTI Distribution Download, the podcast where we talk about all things happening in the world of electronic components with the specialists of TTI. And now, your host for the TTI Distribution Download, Paula Renfrow.
Thanks, Jim. Hey, everybody. Thanks for plugging into the TTI Distribution Download. This episode, we welcome back to the studio TTI's Vice President of Total Quality, Kevin Sink. Hey, Kevin, thanks for coming in.
Well, hello.
So tell us a little bit about your journey here at TTI and how you earned your responsibilities.
Well, I came to TTI in 1992, so I've been here 32 years.
Wow, impressive.
I worked out of our Houston office for the first 10 or 12 years in sales and branch product management and sales management, and I came to Fort Worth, corporate headquarters, in 2001 to be the director of sales operations to help our branches all across the country be better at their jobs. And then I moved over to quality in 2011, sometime around there, 10 or 12 years ago.
Yeah, you know, I'm gonna weigh in at about 2011 because that's when I joined the company, and I've always known you as the total quality expert. You've been a total quality guy my whole career.
Thank you.
As our specialist in quality and counterfeit risk mitigation, you've written a few articles for TTI's Market Eye Resource Center, and of course we appreciate that. And as I mentioned earlier, let's talk today about counterfeit, national security, and the CHIPS Act. In other words, your recent attendance at the Symposium on Counterfeit Parts and Materials. Tell us about it.
So the Symposium is really the gold standard in our industry in terms of learning about counterfeit parts and how to avoid them. What are the trends in counterfeits? What kinds of things are the bad guys up to? And how can we spot them? And how can we as a community, particularly in the mil-aero side, protect ourselves against encountering these. It takes place every summer around July, the week before July 4th, in Washington, D.C. area at the University of Maryland in College Park. And it's put on jointly by the Center for Applied Life Cycle Engineering, CALS as they're known, and SMTA, which is Surface Mount Technology Association. So we have the experts from the user community in the SMTA, and we have the experts in the educational space and the researchers from CALS. And in that, we always have some great speakers. We're able to get a lot of speakers from the U.S. government because a lot of their regulations make a big impact on what we do. And they're trying to protect, of course, our defense, our armed services, and we want to make sure that all the parts that our armed services use are real and do exactly what they're supposed to do. So it's a great place to go to learn these things, to meet a lot of other people in the industry and those that are really focused on preventing fake parts from getting into our systems.
I know you moderated a session this year. So what was your subject and what were the key takeaways from that session?
My subjects were more on the acquisition policy and legal side. So I moderated a session with Dr. Mike Fritz, who's a senior fellow at the Potomac Institute for Policy Studies. And he talked about, he had a comprehensive review of the history of the Department of Defense microelectronics acquisition policy. And he really gave us a nice history lesson to kind of help us understand where we are today. So if we go back, say, to 2003, when 90 nanometers was the state of the art in terms of microelectronics, and we always want the state of the art in our defense industry, there were 17 different suppliers at that time. But if you fast forward until today, the state of the art is down to 3 or 5 nanometers, and there's really only 2 to 3 suppliers. And so we need to keep the ability as in the United States and amongst our allies to be able to defend and utilize those latest technologies. So other things have come along, and that was really a motivation, as Dr. Fritz was pointing out to us, for the CHIPS Act, which was the act that gave us about $52 billion to put into the industry in the United States so that we can have foundries here that will make sure that in the long run, indeed, we do have this technology at hand and under our own control should we ever find ourselves in a difficult situation. So he talked a bit about that and made some recommendations for the acquisition strategy for the Department of Defense, because of course there's DoD people that attend this, working with multiple fabs instead of relying on just one. The CHIPS investment will help a lot with that. And other strategies really to help guarantee a supply in low volume, because if you look at mil-aero, although it's a big industry, in terms of semiconductors, it's really not very big in compared to, say, iPhones.
In terms of the volume, or the volume and the breadth of components?
Both, actually both, but the breadth, volume in particular. You know, the semiconductor manufacturers are driven by that volume.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's only a few hundred airplanes being made, it's just a few minutes worth of production of cell phones. And they have tended towards other technologies which use higher volumes. So we still need that type of technology in our devices, but for the defense industry, we don't usually have that kind of volume.
So when you say there's not much volume, then how does the counterfeit product make its way into that market?
Generally, it's economic reasons that if you think about it, it takes about 8 to 10 years for a new program, from the time somebody dreams up a new weapon system until it finally gets made and put into service. And then they expect it to last in service for another 20 years. So you have a 30-year-old design by the time it's taken out of service. Well, my gosh, in 30 years, electronics changes dramatically. And so the industry has sometimes long since given up on that technology or that size of technology and moved on to several generations later. And that's where the counterfeits kind of start showing up, because we need to keep those things operational. You go back to the manufacturer says, well, I quit making that 15 years ago. So they tried to scour the world to find anybody who might have just a few to keep it going. And that's when a counterfeiter says, aha, there's an opportunity, and they sell it for many, many, many times what it would have cost, but they go about.
So scarcity, same idea as when we're on allocation. I know we see your work double, triple when we're in an allocation situation. Same idea. Exactly.
Absolutely. Allocation drives it. About 45% of counterfeits today in our space that are found are for parts that are obsolete.
And you talk about these things and plan for these things at these symposiums.
We do. Yeah, because we know that state actors are involved. And so when they get to be much more complex than simply resurfacing something that you or I might dream up in our garage, when it gets to the point of, wow, that looks just exactly like a brand new one, then you start wondering, has somebody tampered with that? Or it's the exact same circuit, except for this extra circuit that seems to be able to turn it on or off or send a signal back to whoever the state actor is to learn what we're up to.
Mm-hmm. So what steps have you seen our industry take this year? Anything new to mitigate this risk?
Yes, there are always, I learned from these, there are really super smart people there. Sometimes it's way over my head, and I've struggled to keep up and wished I'd have paid more attention to physics. One of the things that was brought up, for example, was a detection technique which uses nitrogen atoms within a microscope that uses a diamond. And those nitrogen atoms, as they are excited in different ways, will make something fluoresce. And you can then determine, does it look like a real one? Does it fluoresce like a real one, or is this somehow different? So the technology in terms of finding a fake always evolves and gets better, because we do have several universities that are working on techniques to not only to find counterfeits, but for other things that have counterfeit application against counterfeits. But you also have things like side channel. So if there's noise, think about back in the old days. I'll give away my age here.
You already did 32 years.
Oh, yeah, that's right. When you ran the vacuum,
you got here very young. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
When you run the vacuum cleaner and your television would go all fuzzy, that is noise that's being generated that the television is then picking up and trying to display on the screen. Well, the same thing happens with anything electronic. And if you have the right frequency, you can determine, wait, is that the kind of noise I would expect out of a genuine article, or is that the noise that's different than the genuine article? So there are a lot of really unique ways to find something where the part might not be acting like a real one. But the scarier things are the things that are true counterfeits and clones, where someone has made an exact replica with a die inside of it that was made at a foundry somewhere in the world that seems to perform just like the real one. A lot of times it's a much smaller die because the technology has gotten better and they just put it in the same size package. So it's a little difficult. You can run lots of tests on that and go, wow, this worked great, must be real. And so those are the ones that are much harder to detect, and those are the ones you start to suspect state actors when those things get to that level of expertise. So those are some of the things we talked about. One of the more interesting topics in that symposium, though, was really about why aren't there more lawsuits about this?
Yeah.
And the Patricia Campbell, who's a professor there at the University of Maryland, she did a study and looked into why aren't there more counterfeit lawsuits. And there's multiple reasons, but one of the things that's more interesting I'd never heard of is called the material alteration theory. If you can imagine, the name kind of gives it away. Did you somehow materially alter this part or this handbag to look like a Gucci, right? That type of thing. And that theory and its use has different applications in terms of what is a violation of trademark law and what is not. And the problem that's occurred is in certain district courts within the U.S., some say, yes, that applies to this type of product. And others say, no, as long as the trademark is still intact, it looks just like you haven't adjusted the trademark, then that doesn't apply. And so lawyers have given up in many cases because the circuits are split. There's no real path for them to go, oh, yeah, if I can prove that they altered this part, then we're going to win, because you might end up in a circuit that doesn't feel that way. So that was a disappointing thing to learn, but it does explain to some degree why there haven't been more. The other is that a lot of these counterfeiters are outside the country, and we don't have any jurisdiction there. We have successfully lured some of them into the country and captured a few of them as they get off the plane, but that's not very many. So you have to look towards the third parties, the people that are selling them. And let's say you're selling them on an internet site. Well, the internet sites don't have liability in that case because of a case involving Tiffany's and eBay, where people were selling fake Tiffany's products. Tiffany wanted to sue eBay for putting them on that portal. And the result of that was that unless eBay had specific knowledge of a specific item that was wrongly being presented on their site, that they were not liable. Just generally knowing that, yes, you'll find fake things on eBay or Alibaba or even Amazon, that's not good enough. And so that channel of sales has kind of made it harder to prosecute people that might traffic in the goods. So it's hard to catch the counterfeiters because they're not in the United States. And it's hard to catch the people that are selling them in the United States because they're doing it via...
They simply say, I'm a reseller.
I don't know.
And I'm assuming they don't say I'm an authorized reseller.
No, they never.
Then you would have them.
Yes. So the authorization is very important, and that's one of the most important things that has changed over time, is that the authorized channel, which is the main person who makes the parts and the distributors that they contract with to sell the parts, that channel ensures that the customer gets a real and legitimate part each time. And when you leave that channel, then you're taking a risk.
You're at risk, yeah. So we talk primarily on this show to engineers, design engineers. We talk about, we try to talk about new product, all the time, new technologies. So, but where does this, I'm going to say, responsibility really lie? Is there something that the engineer, the design engineer, can do? Is this a procurement responsibility issue to mitigate with our customer partners? A quality role? I know we hold you responsible here.
Sure.
But what about our customer partners? What's the best thing? We said authorized distribution, right?
Yes.
Anything else?
So it's multifaceted in terms that procurement can always help. by buying enough, let's call them spares, to last 20 years into the future, and knowing that they would last, and having enough of those. The sales side of those companies can also help by negotiating contracts that allow for continuing engineering work as that part is no longer available in the marketplace, to pay for the time it's going to cost for the engineer to redesign to come up with another part that would work in its place. Unfortunately, so many of the contracts that are negotiated directly, let's say with the government, don't have any extra engineering. They just had engineering to keep it, to design it to begin with, but not to sustain it. And so the better we can get at negotiating that as a customer with the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense being able to fund it through Congress, then the lower chances we'll have over time that somebody will be out looking for a part that they just can't get anymore. And so both those things, a strategy that would keep product available to you, knowing that you are not, you can't control the industry like maybe you did 30 years ago because the commercial industry is so much bigger. You have to use different strategies now, and that is trying to build up a stock, have a distribution partner who will hold inventory for you, and also have some engineering money put away. So when that thing does become obsolete, you have something that will help pay for the time to re-engineer it.
And this is generally in the integrated circuit component arena. How about in the passives, electromechanical?
So in the passives, you will see it come up when there's any type of shortage or allocation.
Okay.
So we saw it most recently when the MLCC manufacturers decided they no longer wanted to make large chips. Because they can make the same value and voltage in a much smaller chip today. And instead of just raising the price and still supporting it, they didn't want to do that. They wanted to just make small chips and force everybody to change their products. Of course, in the mil-aero world, it's very difficult to change a product, or medical too. It'd be very, very difficult. So people that were using these larger chips had to go out somewhere to find them, to buy them some time until they could do some sort of re-engineering. And that drove up the appearance of MLCCs that were fake. MLCCs are relatively easy to counterfeit because most of them are not marked at all. So you could buy a cheap brand and just put a good brand label on it. At most, they have the value, and the smaller they are, the harder it is to even get that on there. So those become popular when there is a shortage. But last year, you had to go down to about, I'd say, company number 20-something before you ever got somebody who was in the business of the passives, whose products are being counterfeited. Say Texas Instruments, for example, is the most counterfeited brand that we're aware of. And then it goes down from there, and so you have to go way down to company number 20 before you get.
It's going to be a passive manufacturer.
Before you get a passive manufacturer. Yeah, because counterfeiters aren't dumb. They want to counterfeit hundreds, not pennies, right?
And the value, as you
exactly.
said.
But when they become scarce, they will pop up again. Connectors are harder because connectors have so very few companies that use exactly the same connector. Let's say a USB connector, sure. But once you get beyond that, which, a circular connector, there's probably only one company using that pinout and rotation of that connector. So it's not as easy for them to make a counterfeit and have a market for it versus other products which have lots of different applications. So you don't generally see it as much in the connector. You can see it in electromechanical, particularly because electromechanical is an older technology, and other countries have learned or have been making those things for a long time. And so there is machinery around the world.
You have primarily reliability issues in that area.
Yes, because they're not made from, they're cheaper because they're not made with the same materials.
Well. Yeah, they're just not. So what about transportation? A lot of our customers, that's a big concentration for us here. And of course, we all remember, supply chain post, or not really, toward end of COVID, let's say, big shortage right?
Yeah.
For that affected transportation. Was there counterfeit issues there?
The biggest shortage problem they ran into is that the automotive industry tried to treat the electronics industry like they do their other suppliers
With the just-in-time.
with the just-in-time model. And they said, well, I don't have demand for it right now, so I'm going to take myself out of line. I'm going to cancel any orders I have. I don't need these parts. And then expect you to magically come up with them when I want them. And they even, the volumes that automotive have still pales in comparison to consumer electronics.
Yeah.
So they finally ran into an industry that did not cower when they, did not jump when they said, not say how high when they said jump, right?
Yeah.
So they have learned that they do have to have some inventory in the channel. So distribution helps quite a bit with that. They're also trying to do more direct negotiation with some of those manufacturers to counteract that. But it's definitely, now the good thing about their products, and a car is pretty big. So you can use older technology, which of course would eventually get left behind. That's true. But they're not usually the most cutting edge because you need a track record of reliability before you put such risk with the general public driving that they really
thinking from the mil-aero perspective, heavily regulated transportation reliability and hazardous conditions still being very important, but maybe not as highly regulated.
And not as willing to take a risk because it's not a soldier, it's maybe a person and their whole family at risk. And we all of course care about our soldiers, but it's a different reality. So the transportation industry still has some struggles there. I would say they need to think about this. But the mil-aero, so if I look at in the terms of who knows the most about this risk, the mil-aero community knows the most by far about the risk.
And is at the greatest risk?
At the greatest risk.
Counterfeit entering their supply chain. Yeah, they are. Purposefully or just from a greed perspective, both.
Both, yeah. Either, you have state actors trying to spy on you, or sabotage you, and you also have just nefarious bad guys. It's amazing to me how some of these bad guys are so smart.
Yeah,
they really are.
They are, yeah. So speaking about really the evolution of technology here, and most of the podcast episodes that we recorded lately, the topic of AI comes up. So what role will artificial intelligence play in the counterfeit market? I mean, I imagine, as I'm learning here today, both a threat and a threat mitigation, perhaps? Yeah,
from a threat standpoint, you can still today, but it won't be much longer, look at a website and find misspellings, awkward grammar. And I'm sure my grammar in their native language would be horrible too, right? But as AI gets better, those websites are going to look more and more real, and they'll be able to copycat an entire manufacturer's website, at least for a while. So that's from a threat standpoint. The things that you can usually spot to kind of tell you, just like in a phishing campaign by an email, those kinds of things you can kind of spot. As they get better at that, that'll be harder to spot. But on the other side, AI is being used to help a company build a database of good product and what a good part looks like. So there's several companies. One company has an approach where as the part is being placed on the board, it takes a picture of the part, compares it to all the other pictures, and says, yep, this looks within some great degree of reasonableness, that this is the same exact part as the last one. This is good, until it finds something different. So it's learning over time what a good part looks like. That's valuable because it can be very difficult to go to the manufacturer. You get a spec sheet and you understand what it looks like on that day. But over the course of time, the materials might have to change, so it changes color. They move production from one plant to another, so something else changes. And it's hard to keep up with that when you have a whole bill of materials and then you have lots and lots of different products you're trying to make. So AI has the ability to kind of watch that over time for you and keep track of what's good, and then notify you, hey, something's changed.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can go investigate, talk to the manufacturer, say what's changed here.
What else did you learn at your symposium? Anything that I forgot to ask you about?
There are a lot of really smart people that are doing yeoman's work to help protect us. The better we can stick to the authorized channels, the safer everyone's going to be. And the industry's learned that.
Mm-hmm.
As the industry is, one of the things I've learned is that a lot of our customers didn't understand the difference between an independent distributor and an authorized distributor. And they're getting much better about understanding that difference now and really buying from authorized channels at all time, and then having a lot more rigid controls if they have to buy outside that channel. And a lot more testing involved, and then qualifying certain ones that they feel are doing a good job. So that is always progressing, and we're getting better at that. As a general rule, we're getting better at spotting things. So it's upping the game for the counterfeiters. They have to expend more money and resources to make more and more parts that could slip
Mm-hmm.
by.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's now forcing them into the role where they're starting to make true counterfeits, what I call, not just something that's been remarked or relabeled, but it's an actual brand new die being placed in a plastic package and looks brand new. It is brand new. It's just not made by who they say it's made by.
Therefore, saving them all the branding, right? Yeah.
Yeah, somebody else has done all the marketing, and absolutely.
It's a working part. Well, Kevin, thank you for all you do to protect our customer partners and in the supply chain in general, and for being here at this episode, of course, and your recent Market Eye article. We're happy to have you back on Market Eye here recently.
Well, thank you. It was quite a pleasure.
Thanks to our listeners for plugging in today. If, like me, you learned something today, you can learn more from Kevin and other TTI subject matter experts at tti.com/Market Eye. Until next time, I'm Paula Renfrow, and this is the TTI Distribution Download.
That's it for this episode of the TTI Distribution Download. For more information on any of the topics you heard about today, reach out to your nearby TTI branch at 1-800-CALL-TTI or visit us online at tti.com.